Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the conversation. My name is Michael Barnett, your host. And today I am joined by Jasmine Martirossian, a Gallup-certified strengths coach and the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer at Strategy Ark. I am so excited to have Jasmine on the show today to share a lot of her knowledge about building high performance culture in an organization. Super, super important. This is something that you all have been asking for a number of months, and we have delivered. Jasmine, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Michael. I'm delighted to be your guest today on this podcast. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today are essentially how to understand high performance teams, what they look like, coaching in an organization, building a coaching culture. We'll talk about common leadership challenges and blind spots. And lastly, how to sustain a culture of coaching, which coaching cultures is something that a lot of founders, CEOs, leadership teams want to build. A lot of them don't really know where to start or know how to build those things. And then lastly, how to maintain it for those who have started, but don't really know how to keep things going. So I'm glad you're here, Jasmine, because you are the supreme expert on these topics and can really share a lot of context around that. I would like to begin with, I am attached to what you do at a very high level because when I started my career as a young 20-something, I was lucky enough to get promoted into a role at a large company as a coach.
Nice.
I was a sales coach, which then became leadership coach, which then spun off into a private business that I started as a business and a performance coach.
Nice.
Got certified and did all the work necessary to be good at that lifestyle, I call it. And I find that coaching is a highly valuable and unique skill set that is not for everybody. It's not for everybody. And that it does take time, study, and dedication to get really good at it. So again, something that's near and dear to me, and interested to hear everything that you have to say today about coaching culture and building teams.
You're right. Actually, there is a huge proliferation of coaches. But let's face it, probably not everybody is good because just declaring yourself a coach is not good enough. And then you need to have a lot of expertise and knowledge to serve and deliver what a coach does. You called it a lifestyle, but for those who retain coaches, and some people are even embarrassed to say they have a coach, but remember, no winning sports team wins championships without a coach. And the coach for executives is like your side door mirror when you're driving a car. When you do not have your mirrors, your rear view and your side mirrors, you just cannot function really well. And we all have blind spots. And then the coach will not do the actual work for you, but it brings perspective to certain things. So and sometimes when we're within something, we do not fully see it ourselves. And it's very hard for us to gain that perspective. So a coach helps you have that perspective, also drives accountability. It's kind of your accountability partner in doing certain things that we otherwise want to do, but may not always consistently do.
Right. I've heard a lot of it. I've spoken to a lot of business leaders, founders, CEOs, high performance individuals. And I've heard many of them say they don't, quote unquote, need a coach. And what I hear them really saying is, I haven't yet figured out how to place my ego aside and let someone else in to assess where I can get better. In order to be coached, right, you have to learn how to kind of move the ego aside and allow a coach in. And then I think a great coach is someone who is going to spend the time to understand your client or your customer, whoever that client or customer is, and help them become comfortable with the coaching process And would you agree to that with that?
Yeah, and to me, it's, as I said earlier, some people are maybe almost embarrassed to say they have a
Right.
coach. But again, no winning team does it without a coach, period. And I personally seek out, in essence, you could say I'm surrounded by a team of coaches because always from a very early young age in my life, I have made sure to surround myself with brilliant people who mentor, coach, and guide. I will ask their perspectives. Now, I may not always do as they say, but I think when you make an informed decision and take your own risks, that's really powerful. And when you've considered all the options from A to Z, that's powerful. And guess what? Sometimes when you're not consulting others, you may not see that.
I would agree with you 100%. So, Jasmine, would you please, for all of our viewers, can you help us understand a little bit about Strategy Ark, what the mission of the company is, what is it that you do every day?
So think of Strategy Ark is your three-legged stool. The word ark comes from Noah's Ark, which was like from Mount Ararat, which is very Armenian, which was visible. So the Ark had everything to continue life. And so Strategy Ark is positioned to really help organizations scale their business and be successful working from their strengths. And it's a three-legged approach. So on the one hand, we look at the strengths training, building high-performance teams, because if your organization is growing, your biggest investment are people. And unless your people are really working from their strengths, you have a lot of opportunity loss. Even if it's a seemingly good team, you do not know how much better they can be if you reorient yourself and work from strengths. The next part of what we do is strategic planning. So everybody thinks they do strategic planning right, but we do it very differently. We do pre-interviews, we identify issues, because in a discussion, regardless of what you're doing, a certain type of an opinion, conventional brainstorming, prevails, and then that carries everything. And then in the end, people do not speak up. You do not hear the true perspectives, and fundamentally, there is no buy-in. Like literally, I was facilitating a strategic planning session recently with the board of directors without naming names, and during the introductions part, I will ask people to also use one word they would use to characterize themselves, right? And the first person said busy. You'd be surprised how many people subsequently diverted to you saying busy or something along those lines, like stretched or stressed. And I said, guess what? You guys just validated the science behind this, that an idea rises up and it starts dominating, and then other voices are not being heard.
That's because it's easy. It's easy.
Because it's easy. We all default to that. And then the third part of what Strategy Ark does, we do state-of-the-art marketing. We work with sales and marketing teams, again, helping scale the business. It's all kind of staggered and interrelated. So we take a very holistic approach. Will say, oh, just do this one thing. But usually one thing outside of a context is not going to deliver that magical result that everybody's looking for.
Makes sense. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So let's talk about the understanding high performance teams, which is a major aspect of what you do at Strategy Ark. So I'd like to kind of dive into what, in your opinion, does a high performance team look like? Because a lot of companies may say, well, I have a high performance team, right? But what does that actually look like from a scientific approach? So when you come in, you conduct your assessment, how do you know this is a high performance team already? And wow, there's some things that we can do here to kind of extract more value from this team or help them become more efficient. Or wow, this isn't a high performance team. Here is what they're missing. And here is what we can do to get them to a next level.
So first of all, the overwhelming majority of the corporate North America works from weaknesses, not strengths, which means, think of it as a performance review time. Every manager thinks it's their job to pretty much dress people down and focus on things you can absolutely improve. And then if it's an annual review, they may bring up something that happened 9 months ago that they did not provide adequate feedback about, but now they're going off on that, and so much time has passed, and a person's perplexed. And what it ends up doing is dressing down people and clipping their wings. In the meantime, the person may have done 10 or 100 things really well, and that doesn't get mentioned. Again, that clips wings. What John Clifton, the founder of Gallup Strengths, did, the creator of the Clifton StrengthsFinder, well over 50 years ago, was ask a question. He's one of the founders of positive psychology. The question was, what would happen if we actually worked from people's strengths, not weaknesses? So when we understand what people's strengths are, we're able to amplify them and actually put air under their wings to let them take off and soar. That makes a world of difference. So to start with, a high performance team starts with a feeling of engagement and action of engagement. People don't get the Sunday scaries, which is now a phrase in the English language. I remember reading a Wall Street Journal article that talked about how corporate America dives into deep depression at 5 p.m. on Sundays as they're thinking of dinner because that's like the end of their weekend.
Right.
And they
back to work again, right?
Yeah. And if it feels like that, that's a terrible feeling. I'll be honest, when people very often congratulate one another saying Happy Friday, it's a little depressive when you delve into it because it means they've been feeling absolutely miserable the entire week.
I would agree with you on that. I for better or for worse, I engage with many other companies besides my own. I'm on podcasts or Zoom meetings or being pitched on something. And it never fails that if I'm on a call with another company on a Thursday or Friday, I'm always greeted with the Happy Friday. Oh, so happy it's the end of the week. Honestly, what I'm thinking is, I don't think that way. Not because I'm like this super positive, happy-go-lucky person. That's not it. I don't think that way because I actually love my work. I love what I do every day. So I don't look forward to Friday. The weekend for me isn't like a break. So that's for me personally. But I know what you mean. When I hear that, it's depressing. I'm thinking, wow, you really don't like what you do you?
Exactly. That's what it
Right.
says, right?
It
Yet
does.
the phrase has become so normalized. But the connotation is, oh, we've been so unhappy, or this is some kind of a trial for us, or this is torture. And you're right. It means people are not really engaged in loving what they're doing. And if that's the case, you just don't have a high performance team. Period. I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate the weekend as much as the next person. There's a time and place to everything. But if I'm to waste 5 days or 4 days these days out of my week, that's not a happy place to be.
If you were going to provide, let's say, 3 bullet point blueprint to someone who is watching for them to kind of assess, is my team high performance or not? What are like some glaring bullets that they can kind of look at to make that determination?
They have a sense of ownership that comes from within. Like that's the measure of engagement. Are they really coming up with solutions, or is there just a lot of negative whining? Are they empowered are they fending to find a solution, or are they waiting for you to tell them every step of the way what to do? That's the difference between having an engaged team and a team that's going through the motions to collect a paycheck.
That makes sense. How much of that, in your opinion, is related to hiring natural personality types that would generally exude those types of attributes?
You know, Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines, famously said, don't hire for skills, hire for attitude. That's absolutely true, because you can always train for skills. You cannot train for attitude. Hap Klopp, who the founder of the North Face, whom I'm fortunate to know personally and who's been guiding and mentoring me and advising for a long time, he always says, if you want motivated employees, hire motivated people. Absolutely true. But at the same time, you also need the right leadership that knows how to keep up that positive energy, because we can all bring out as leaders the best in people and the worst in people. So how leaders approach people, how they maximize their strengths, how they actually put the emphasis, because not everybody is good at everything. But if you maximize what people are really good at, your outcomes will be so much better and stronger than if you don't. Period.
Agreed. I understand. So we've identified what a high performing team looks like, which makes it easier for us to make a determination if our team isn't a high performance team. And we've also discussed at a high level the role of management in cultivating those teams. I like to kind of transition and talk about the role of coaching cultures in these organizations. And the reason why I wanted to focus on that today is because this is my opinion. In my opinion, too many companies haven't embraced coaching cultures and still utilize the kind of like command and control management strategy, which is kind of just like do what I say. Or a lot of companies advertise, we have this great culture, but then you get in, you read their Glassdoor reviews and it's like, it doesn't seem like that. People hate working there. It's obvious. The reviews were from last week. Okay. And where do I get this data from? Well, we interview a lot of candidates for a lot of roles. And one of the questions that I ask every single candidate is I ask questions about the culture of their current or last organization. What are the things that they like? What are the things that they don't like? What are the things that they wish their new company had that their current company has? What are some of the things that they wish their new company doesn't have, okay, that your current company has? And so that's where I get my data from, is my one-on-one experience interviewing hundreds of candidates. And so that's kind of where and then going and doing the research and reading the Glassdoor reviews, right, of our competitors and other companies. But I just wonder, how does building a culture of coaching differ from the typical management command and control approach that is kind of still common today, even at small companies? I know some small companies that are run by people that I know that use that strategy. It's not very inspiring.
Well, that's a really good, deep, multifaceted question. And I'll try to answer it from a few different angles, right? First of all, culture of coaching actually speaks to setting a level and a mark for excellence. So when you have that, when you tell the people, look, I'm going to make sure you have the right resources to be your best, that sends a different message. A lot of organizations engage in, I'd say, random acts of coaching. Just like random acts of marketing do not deliver results, nor do random acts of coaching. Frankly, nor does random acts of anything. You can't cook a meal once and say, I've provided great dinners for my family for the whole year, right? And then you mentioned how you see a lot of the time leaders having the do as I say culture. I'd ask all of those leaders to just, if they have kids especially, or if they remember their own childhood vividly, how well did it work when parents say, do as I say? It's because I said so.
Doesn't work very well.
Any parent will tell you it just does not work well. Explaining the why behind your decisions, explaining the because behind your decision actually really seriously increases people's buy-in, right, and compliance with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So there is an attitudinal issue as well, and it's also a matter of like self-education. You have to learn, and then we all have an influence on the people around us. And guess what? We can either bring out the best in people or the worst in people. Which one do we choose to do, right? And the same is true in all of us. We're human. All of us have not ideal features and not so ideal features. Which one will rise to the occasion at different times, right? So it all kind of makes a sense. And when you have a commitment to kind of building that high performance team, the culture, the best way that I've seen is when you understand what are the strengths of your people. Sometimes also people are not put into the right role. When I was at a German multinational company, I had a large team, and because inside sales also reported to me, so we'd hired somebody as a marketer. Frankly, as a marketer, the guy was like an F-, terrible.
No.
The writing of sentences was like run-ons for like a three-story building. It was terrible. But it's one thing the way people interview, but then in action things are very obvious, right? And any reasonable, rational person would have just had to replace this person. But there was a voice in me that said somehow this person is not in the right role. So we moved the person because the person had a lot of customer service experience. Moved the same person to an inside sales team role. Guess what? Now their performance was an A plus, clearing huge checks from commission in the right role.
Right. Put them in
So
the right
you
seat on
can
the
say,
bus.
you see on LinkedIn, people say, well, when you plant a flower and it's not blooming, you don't change the flower, you just improve the environment. So the flower should be planted in the right soil.
Correct.
People need to be in the right role. So all of that makes a difference. So when you understand what a person's strength calls for, that's a very different, strength set for a certain role than others.
100% true. There's a process to that. And it just doesn't, I mean, for someone like you, who you're an expert at this, so you understand the process, what you're looking for to identify, okay, based upon this person's behaviors, their attributes, their attitude, the work product that they're producing, you could probably make an educated inference on if they're in the right seat on the bus or if they should be moved or try something else. But for all of us that aren't, there are tools for something like this.
Knowing thyself, knowing what your own strengths are. This is the other thing. Most people do not know what they're really good at. And then when Gallup training shows, Gallup research, think of it as us having a cocktail of strengths, right? Most people, the basic test is top 5, but fundamentally it's the top 10 that define who you are. So if you know, and think of it as tools at the top of a toolbox. There are 34 strengths in Gallup. Top 10 are the tools that we rely on. Think of it, that's how our brains are wired. That's how we approach life. That's how we approach situations. If you really understand what your top 10 are and you lean on them, your life outcomes are going to be dramatic, and your life will improve. Most people do not know that. For instance, I'm a very positive person. I have this sense of optimism, which I consider to be a divine gift. Because even in situations where I don't know where the solution is, I somehow know there is a way. There's always a third option. But it took me to really understand my Gallup strengths to understand where that's coming from. It's not the positivity strength, it's the self-assurance one, which allows me to go into the unknown, take risks, an insanely valuable skill, which I consider a gift. But knowing that, then I know how to modulate and moderate my own behavior. Like I know what part I'm leaning on. Then like I have my number 5 is strategic. So I see patterns in things. So you have to understand some people, my number 6 is activator, which means you like to get started. But usually people who get started with something, they will not finish. It helps me that I have achiever as number 1. So achiever will finish things. But if I'm creating a team, I would not put all activators together because that project would not end.
Makes sense.
They would get started, but then they would lose the steam and interest. So you need to understand how you're composing your team, which people are, think of it as a ship, like who's doing what role on deck.
Makes sense.
Everybody has a role.
So that's where the Strength Finders, the Gallup Strength Finders tool comes into play here. Like over my career, I've used various tools to personality assess individuals, right or wrong or indifferent. Not sure at this point. Some things work better than others. We've used like Myers-Briggs. I've used DISC. I've used
Done them all.
PI, all these different tools.
Yeah. Predictive index.
Right.
DISC.
You name it. You are bought into the Gallup Strength Finders tool.
Because it's the most tailored to you individually.
Got it. So I'd like to hear more about that. Like how does that work? And like, how would a company like use that high level to kind of help their organization?
I haven't met a person. Well, I know some people that fake their answers. But if you genuinely answer the questions And I don't see why you would not, because there are no wrong strengths. It just shows who you are. And we're all better off knowing how we're wired, who we are, what motivates us, what drives us. So I have never met a person who authentically took the test who didn't say, oh my goodness, it describes me to myself. For me personally, the first time I took the test and they say your first test result is the most accurate, it was like looking in the mirror. And it drives self-understanding. It also, you will have only one other person with their top 5 strengths appearing in the same order, say among 33 million people. It shows you how unique every person is. And even the same strength in a different sequence has a slightly different connotation and meaning for people.
Okay.
So it's phenomenal. It also sheds a light on how unique every single one of us is. And it helps you value and understand people better and more. And if you think about it, so of every one of us, there are probably only another 10 people in the US with our exact strength sequence. Isn't that staggering?
It is. It means we're very unique. At the same time, the way I see, at least the way that I've used tools like this in the past, and I'm sure the way that other managers, coaches, or executives have used tools like this before, right or wrong, is I've used them to sort of build a general profile of a type of individual that I wanted to source for a specific role. And so for a sales role, here's what that map looks like. For an operations role, here's what that map looks like. For a developer role, here's what that map looks like. It sounds like StrengthsFinders is different and would be used a little more deeply than just like,
and it's
here's
more
a person
detailed,
high profile.
right?
Yeah.
And it's more detailed. It actually, so as a leader, you can communicate with people better. You can get your messages to people in a more effective way, because guess what? We all communicate differently. So you can emphasize things that are more relatable to them to get your message through and across. And that makes a difference. Whereas most other people will just not do that. And you do a blanket communication, people do not hear the same way. So it allows you to communicate more effectively on Teams. It allows you to press, frankly, on the buttons that resonate with people more rather than less.
Let's say I'm a company, I really want to adopt a new method of engaging my employees internally, adopt a method of coaching to try to shape and change the culture. And maybe I'm not yet ready to go jump off the deep end, kind of bring in a new tool, or maybe even bring in Strategy Ark yet, because I'm not ready for that yet. What are some of the things that I can potentially do to start making some changes to increase my level of success, to then at some point in the future, then I'll be ready to call Jasmine and her team and say, okay, we're ready.
We can start by providing your people more in the moment feedback rather than having the one annual review. That's why some leading companies like Accenture and Deloitte have done away with the traditional annual reviews in favor of ongoing conversations. In my experience, most leaders, most managers do not do a good job of providing that ongoing feedback because, frankly, they're very uncomfortable with a conversation. And where they're making a mistake is making the way they provide feedback much of the time is about the person. You should provide feedback about the issue. Helps in marriage as well, right? Why do so many marriages fall apart? Because they make the issue about the person, not about the issue. They'll go, oh, you are this. You always do this. As opposed to saying, this meeting was bungled up because of this. Let's work on not. Do you see the difference in that?
Let's work on better meetings, right?
But let's work on setting this up better next time. It doesn't say you suck as a human being. You're terrible. It does not say that. And who knows what happened for this meeting being bungled. when you do it that way, you create like more goodwill. But
and there's less blame, and it's like less blame and finger pointing. You're pointing the finger. It makes me feel like a terrible person.
I mean, they say when you point one finger, 3 point back at you. Finger pointing does not help, right? And it's assigning blame does not help. I mean, unless those are life and death situations where somebody has killed people, yeah, that's a different story.
Different story.
But in most everyday corporate situations, that's not an effective form of communication. So number one, learn as a leader to communicate better. And again, problem solve rather than point fingers. Ask questions. One of the most underutilized approaches people have is asking questions. But your next level, it's not a huge investment, get your people tested and to actually do basic trainings to create a framework. So people are working from strength. That really changes the discussion and the narrative. So.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you also mentioned frequent feedback.
Absolutely. Like make it ongoing and be on both the positive and the negative. Like, here's the thing. We take positivity for granted. I mean, let's face it, let's say we're in a corporate building, when the elevator works every day, we do not say, oh, it's great, the elevator's working. We take that for granted. If it doesn't work, we start complaining. We see that. But having gratitude for things that are actually doing well is a very powerful motivator.
It is.
And so thanking people is powerful. They feel valued, they feel appreciated, they feel seen. And it's not that hard to do. Make it a habit.
And so this is the thing. You and I can sit here on a podcast and we can say, do this, do that, employees, yada, yada, yada. In order for any of this to work, management needs to embrace this themselves.
Yes.
Managers and management, in my opinion, need to, and a lot of times, be trained, retrained, and go through a process to where they begin to believe in the process. Because if you don't believe in the process, your people aren't going to believe you.
It will be performative, and again, will be a random acts of whatever you're engaging in just for the check mark.
So in your experience, how much time and effort does it normally take for leadership teams to begin to embrace some of the things that we're talking about to the point where they can be effective in communicating these ideas, topics, strategies, this quote unquote new way for a lot of organizations to their people, and then get buy-in from their people?
I think it's about mindset, frankly, and also seeing results. So instead of starting big just with anything, start with a small team and monitor and create a framework for that team, monitor and see how well it's working. And then when you have proof point, nothing succeeds like success. Then you can do more of the same. That's the whole thing. Most people will not believe something unless they see it. But in order for you to see it, you have to act on it. So it becomes this like positive cycle. But you have to create it and you have to believe in it. And frankly, you also have to have self-insight, knowing like, because I said so, as you said earlier, is not a viable methodology.
Correct.
And as I said, most parents figure that out pretty quickly. And if they don't, they have adverse consequences.
Agreed. And the point, starting with a small team, I think makes a lot of sense. I can tell a story that does more than validate that idea. When I mentioned when we started today's conversation, that I had been promoted into a role at a very large organization that I'd worked for. Ascendant Corporation was the company, and we had over 75,000 employees globally at the time. I worked in an office in New Jersey. It was a part of the company that was responsible for the mortgage and private label, white label operations. And I was a salesperson that got promoted into a sales coach role. I had no idea what it meant to be a sales coach. They put us through a very intensive training program to become a coach. So one of the things that I learned through that process is many of the teams, each sales team had a manager. Each sales team was about 10 salespeople that all had a manager. And there were many, 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 many sales teams. And one of the things that I learned was the sales managers didn't love the concept of being coached and learning how to coach, because like there's now this requirement that you now have to start to coach your team. Your team receives the coaching, you receive the coaching, and then you have to continue the coaching. And so initially the idea was a lot of the managers, they didn't like it. They didn't like the idea of the change, needing to make a change. I have to learn this new thing, which ties back into mindset. But the idea of this coaching academy was we're going to bring one team into the coaching, into this incubator, into a small group setting. And we are going to, over the course of a month or 2 or 3 months, we're going to use this team to show the rest of the teams how we increase this team's performance. And after 60 days in the coaching program, the team that was in the coaching program would increase their performance 40, 50, 60%. Okay. Which now is on a leaderboard. Now it's on display for other teams to say, oh my God, really? They were in the academy for a month or two and holy cow, their commissions went up by 50%. How do I get a piece of that? Okay.
That's the whole thing.
Exactly. And it worked. That is what worked, by bringing the small teams in, by help improving those teams, not only created buy-in at the manager level, but also buy-in at the salesperson or the team level to want to just get the coaching, want to be assessed, right? To want to be involved in this new transformative culture.
I could not agree more with that. And in fact, there's a lot of the time big corporate leaders want to make a splash and they tend to start big. But when you start big, first of all, you haven't tested certain things. So starting small is amazing. And I'll tell you a story. I had worked with an unbelievable company, British headquartered, very innovative, one of the most amazing experiences. So we're launching global projects. And we started with like the big countries for the company's presence, like France and Germany. And those were tough projects. But then we did, for instance, Italy and the Netherlands. And I was there for over a weekend in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And there is a very famous Flemish artist, Peter Paul Rubens, who is known for his giant canvases, absolutely gigantic, really stunning work. But there in the Rijksmuseum, there was a small room next to the room housing a lot of the giant canvases that showed how he executed all of them first on tiny scale. He worked it all out on small models first. And to me, it was like such a jarring example of starting small would have been the right corporate approach. And it goes for this as well. Like a corporation in the Boston area just had me train only their sales team in Boston, something that they're trying to launch nationally, but they started small. And it makes a world of difference.
So starting small, super important, show that it works. Focus on a specific team in an organization. That team can become like the image of success or improvement or high performance to then take that plan and replicate that plan across the organization. Sounds like a great strategy.
Success begets success. So once you establish success in one area, more people are bound to want to replicate that. More people will want to jump on that bandwagon. I remember we were launching a website at Lesley University, and there were a lot of faculty members who did not want to submit their pictures to be on the website. And you would think it was a losing battle, but all you need to do is find a few champions that would be early adopters. So we got pictures of a few people, and then we started circulating them, seeing this is what profiles look like, and this is what yours looks like. We did not say, you do not have a picture, nothing. All of a sudden, the same people who would send you like doctoral dissertation length emails saying how they do not want to have their picture posted were the ones saying, how come my picture isn't there?
Right. Right. Like, where's mine?
Where am I? Because they now see somebody else's shining. And
it's human nature, though. It's human nature, Jasmine.
But it changes the discussion. So instead of chasing them, You showcase what the good looks like without even chasing them. Now they're chasing you.
Now they're chasing you. So how do we sustain this? So we've assessed our organization. We know that we want to make some changes. We've made some changes. We've implemented some of these new behaviors that we've discussed today. Now we have to find a way to sustain it. And I'm sure you see this. I know I definitely saw this when I was a coach. You likely see this on a much higher level than I experienced this in the past, but we've implemented things. We've made an investment. We've done the training. We've started to implemented the assessments. We're communicating differently, like within our first 30 days. Now, Jasmine leaves, Michael leaves, right? We go to focus on another team or someone else. Now, the individuals that we had influenced are left to implement or continue implementing in sustaining the work. Okay. My assumption is a lot of companies and people just fall off, which means we have to come back for a touch up, right? Tell me a little bit about your experience there.
So first of all, people do not, one of the scariest questions I ask in a corporate setting, seriously scares everyone to death, is when I ask them, what is it that you think you might stop doing that you're doing that's ineffective? And that's a very scary question, because immediately where people's mind goes through, oh, are they trying to make my job redundant or me redundant? But the truth is that everybody's doing certain things that are absolutely not needed. Like, I remember at a big global company, when I stepped into a role, I had a person reporting to me, and this person just did not have, he would spend an entire week compiling a report, which then he would distribute, but turns out nobody was reading it. And frankly, it wasn't that important. So I stopped the report, but everybody was treating this like divine proclamation. And reports are only good if they're read, if it's easy, there is a reason for something, right? So number one, if there is some lack of efficacy, stop it and do something else. Once the trainer leaves, unless you create a structure to keep drive accountability, to create a framework, it will fail, because guess what? They'll have a good time in that conference room with you. They leave and they default to their old ways.
Exactly.
So you need to have accountability. You need to create a framework, and the leaders can do a lot by, referencing it. With Gallup Strengths, it's really important to integrate that into the language, saying, so-and-so is, we can lean on, Michael's strategic, and have Michael work on that. See how that changes the language?
Yes.
And that creates a very different level of engagement. I've seen teams who use this, who become extremely proficient and high performance teams, because then they're constantly thinking, what qualities, what strengths of a person are we leaning on? Because ultimately that's what a team needs, right? If everybody's optimized at their strength level, you're going to perform better. But if you're not, you're going to wish for that weekend and run around wishing people happy Fridays.
That's it.
And then there's the Wednesday, right? They go, we're halfway through, like, holy cow.
Right, we're halfway to the end.
How
really?
Torturous is this?
Oh, so Jasmine, it sounds like if companies want to change their culture and the mindset of their organization from we're halfway there, we're halfway out of this torturous experience on Wednesday, and on Friday, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to get out of here mindset, they need to hire Strategy Ark. So I'd like you to talk about how can companies find you, and what type of companies should be contacting Strategy Ark for the services that you provide.
Thank you, Michael. Very generous of you. We're available at strategyark.com. I am always on LinkedIn. I'm probably a LinkedIn addict. So you can reach out to me and message me there. And my email is Jasmine, very simple, at Strategy Ark, STRATEGYARK.com. Jasmine at strategyark.com. Ark with a K, spelled as one word. Looking forward to being contacted. Thank you. But ultimately, it's about building teams where people are more engaged. Gallup says 70% of the American workforce is not engaged. That's a waste of billions of dollars in productivity, and it's a shame. We can do way better.
We can do way better. And I'm sure in the logical transition now, Jasmine, is to talk about AI and how a lot of companies are running to AI to solve that problem because not enough of them knew you and were utilizing you. So they're running to AI as a solution, right, to solve the problem. But AI isn't necessarily the solution.
AI has its great uses, but
Yes.
It's not the answer of everything. And again,
That's
remember,
correct.
It's still people controlling it. And you also want to maximize your people even more. So it's been such a pleasure being on your show.
And I'm glad you were here. And maybe we'll set up another time to talk about AI and its impacts and to answer that question.
Would love to do that, Michael.
But Jasmine, thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me. Super impactful, amazing information. And I'm looking forward to doing it again. Thank you so
Michael.
much.
It's been an honor being here.